How does someone who seemed to have everything still end up fighting battles no one around her could see? Margaux Hemingway entered the 1970s like a supernova, 6 feet tall, impossibly striking, the first model to land $1 million contract, and the granddaughter of one of America's most famous writers. On magazine covers and runways, she looked untouchable. But behind the beauty campaigns and nightlife glamour was a woman carrying far more than the public ever understood. Years of private pain, family shadows, and battles she had been fighting long before fame ever found her. Her rise was fast, dazzling, and unforgettable, but the life underneath it was fragile, complicated, and often painfully lonely. And after years of trying to stay ahead of the things that haunted her, Margaux became yet another victim of the pattern she spent her whole life trying to outrun. So what really happened to the supermodel who seemed destined for everything? Before Margaux Hemingway ever stepped in front of a camera, her life was already shaped by a world she didn't choose. She was born Margaux Louise Hemingway in 1954, the middle of 3 daughters in a family that carried both brilliance and deep fractures. Her grandfather, Ernest Hemingway, cast a long shadow, not only through his fame, but through the instability and tragedy that ran through their bloodline long before Margaux arrived. She was 7 when Ernest ended his own life. She didn't fully understand what it meant, but the weight of that event echoed inside the family for decades. Her childhood in Idaho looked idyllic from the outside. Mountains, nature, a famous last name. But inside the home, things were far more chaotic. Her mother drank heavily. Her parents fought constantly. And by Margaux's own account, she and her sisters grew up in an atmosphere where affection was unpredictable and emotional safety was almost impossible to find. Both Margaux and her sister Marielle later spoke openly about being sexually abused by their father, a trauma that would shape nearly every part of Margaux's life. It remained one of the most painful truths beneath her glamorous image. By her early teens, she was already trying to cope in the only way she knew how. She started drinking at 14, long before she ever set foot in New York. She developed bulimia, hid her depression, and struggled with dyslexia that made school feel like a constant reminder of everything she thought she wasn't. She also developed epilepsy, a condition some doctors linked to the trauma she experienced as a child. The medications helped, but the side effects only added another layer to an already heavy existence. Still, Margaux had a kind of brightness that people noticed. Even when she didn't feel it, others saw the potential. At 19, during a trip to New York with her father, fashion agents spotted her, and suddenly she had a doorway out of the life she'd been trying to survive. She didn't come from the polished world of modeling. She entered it because she needed something that felt bigger and safer than what she'd known so far. And for a moment, it looked like she'd found exactly that. When Margaux arrived in New York at 19, it happened the way every young model dreams of, except nothing about it felt like a dream to her. She had barely unpacked her suitcase when agents, photographers, and magazine editors began circling, drawn to her height, her symmetry, her presence. Within months, she became the face of Fabergé's new perfume, Babe, signing the first $1 million contract ever given to a model. It wasn't just a job. It was the moment the fashion industry declared her its newest obsession. And yet, even when she was becoming New York's supermodel, she never felt as confident as the world assumed. In a 1988 People interview, she admitted, "It sounds glamorous," and it was. But I was also very naive when I came on the scene. I genuinely thought people liked me for myself, for my humor and my good qualities. That mix of innocence and intensity made her magnetic and fragile. The nightlife followed quickly. Studio 54, fashion parties, celebrities who treated her like an instant equal. But underneath the glitter was something darker, a sense that people were taking, not giving. Later she even said, "I never expected to meet so many professional leeches, and New York had plenty." Still, in photographs, she was radiant, easy, effortless. Magazine editors adored her height and her almost statuesque serenity. She could walk into a studio hungover, exhausted, or shaken from the night before, and the camera would still love her. But off camera, the pressure to maintain perfection, the body, the beauty, the temperament, began to intensify the insecurities she'd already been living with since childhood. Her first marriage to Errol Whetson became both an escape and a new source of tension. He was older, wealthy, and at first seemed like someone who could offer stability. But the relationship quickly shifted into something more controlling. A dynamic Margaux later described as suffocating, with expectations she could never seem to meet. And through that, the alcohol didn't stop. Neither did the self-criticism. And yet she kept rising. Magazine covers, runway shows, global campaigns. To the outside world, she was the picture of a woman who had finally found her place. But inside, the cracks were widening, and the demands of fame were beginning to collide with the instability that had been following her since childhood. For all the magazine covers and campaigns, the part of Margaux's rise that's hardest to look back on is what was happening privately, the things fame didn't fix, and sometimes even made worse.
See, it's one of those great diseases like eating or drinking alone. It's one of those diseases that you do by yourself in the closet behind closed doors.
The drinking she'd started at 14 didn't disappear when she became successful. If anything, the pressure amplified it. The industry praised her beauty, but behind that praise was a constant scrutiny of her body, her image, her weight. And for Margaux, that scrutiny fed directly into the bulimia she had been battling since her teens. Her body was becoming the public's conversation piece, even as it was the thing she felt she had the least control over.
Every time I was purging, I was saying that was the last time, and the guilt that goes along with that is unbelievable.
In her own words, it was a battle she fought entirely alone. Then came lipstick. Her big break, her chance to prove she was more than a face on a perfume campaign. But the film became something far harsher emotionally than she expected. The reviews were brutal, attacking her acting, her presence, even her voice. And while she was being torn apart, her 14-year-old sister Marielle, cast alongside her, was suddenly being celebrated as a new discovery. Critics called her the real talent of the film. Overnight, the spotlight shifted, and the press began comparing the sisters in ways that felt humiliating and deeply destabilizing for Margaux. It changed the family dynamic, too. Marielle, younger and more disciplined, had never been comfortable with Margaux's partying. Margaux, already fragile, now felt replaced, not just professionally, but inside her own family. The rivalry wasn't created by the sisters themselves. It was fed by studios, journalists, and an industry that loved a narrative of the new girl outperforming the older one. For someone already carrying trauma, addiction, and long-standing self-doubt, it cut deeply. Meanwhile, Margaux's physical health was deteriorating under the surface. Eating disorders, alcohol, and the medications prescribed for her epilepsy created a constant internal battle. The seizures themselves, which had first appeared after her grandfather ended his life, only added to the fear that her body could fail her at any moment. Doctors later suggested that trauma might have been a trigger, and Margaux herself often wondered how much of her life had been shaped by things she never chose. This is also where the so-called Hemingway curse begins to reappear, not as superstition, but as a pattern. Untreated mental illness, silence around trauma, and a family legacy of self-medicating instead of healing. Margaux was trying to outrun it, but the shadow kept catching up. By the early 1980s, Margaux was holding herself together with sheer force of will, still working, still visible, still trying to stay ahead of everything that was pulling her down. But in 1984, her body finally gave out before she did. While skiing in Austria, she suffered a brutal accident that left her injured for nearly a year. The sudden inactivity, the pain, and the medications caused her to gain more than 70 pounds, And the shift was immediate and vicious. The same industry that had once adored her now treated her as if she no longer existed. Casting directors stopped calling. Photographers moved on. And for a woman whose insecurities already lived close to the surface, the humiliation cut deep. The weight gain wasn't what broke her. It was the cruelty. She had spent her entire adult life being told that her value lived in her face and body. When those changed, the silence from the industry confirmed one of her oldest fears, that she was never loved for who she was, only for what she looked like. The emotional spiral pushed her towards something she had never done before, admitting she couldn't fight alone. At 32, she checked herself into the Betty Ford Center, determined to make a real attempt at recovery. She spoke openly during this period about wanting to live differently than her grandfather, about understanding addiction as something that ran through her family, not a personal weakness. For a moment, it seemed like she had found a foothold. Her voice sounded clearer. Her interviews became more grounded. Friends said they saw glimpses of the girl she once was. But the outside world didn't make room for her comeback. Hollywood wasn't waiting. When she tried to re-enter the industry, the opportunities were smaller. B-movies, low-budget thrillers, projects that treated her name like a marketing tool rather than a sign of talent. And still, she pushed. She tried to show she was healthy again, capable again, working again. One of those attempts was her 1990 Playboy shoot, which she hoped would signal strength and confidence after everything she had survived. Instead, the tabloids twisted it into a spectacle, another excuse to paint her as unstable, desperate, or out of control. It was the opposite of what she intended. Her personal life wasn't offering safety either. 2 marriages had ended. Her relationship with her family was strained and complicated, and between the lingering effects of addiction, the unresolved trauma, and the pressure to rebuild a public image she no longer had the energy to maintain, Margaux found herself drifting through the early 1990s without a real foundation beneath her. By the time she moved into her small Santa Monica apartment, the people around her were beginning to notice signs that something wasn't right. Neighbors later described her as disoriented, withdrawn, sometimes appearing confused, not in a sensational way, but in the quiet, heartbreaking way that suggests someone who is trying to hold themselves together with less and less support. And that's the part of her story that's uncomfortable, but important. Margaux wasn't failing because she didn't try. She tried, repeatedly. She sought treatment. She worked. She showed up. She asked for help in the ways she knew how. But every system surrounding her, the industry, her family, the media, failed to hold someone who had been signaling distress for most of her life. She was doing everything she could. It just wasn't enough to carry the weight alone. In July 1996, at just 42 years old, Margaux Hemingway's life came to an end, in circumstances later ruled intentional by the Los Angeles County coroner. The report was factual, but minimal. And her family, especially Marielle, struggled at first to accept what had happened. What remains clear is that Margaux had been fighting for stability for most of her life, and the support she needed simply never arrived in time. Her passing became another entry in what the media quickly labeled the Hemingway curse, making her roughly the 5th family member in 4 generations to die by their own hand. But that phrase, while dramatic, hides more than it reveals. It suggests myth instead of reality, and it turns a human being into a narrative device. The truth is less supernatural and more painful. Generations of untreated mental illness, silence around trauma, addiction that no one wanted to name, and an industry that celebrated Margaux's beauty while ignoring her suffering. Margaux wasn't a symbol. She was someone who kept trying. She wanted a life different from the one she grew up in, and she fought for it far longer than most people ever knew. We all wanted to be okay, Marielle later said. We just didn't know how. So the question becomes, what do we do with a story like hers? Do we repeat the myth, or do we look at what her life actually shows? That beauty doesn't protect anyone, that fame can't heal old wounds, and that people who seem larger than life can still be unbearably alone. When you look at Margaux now, do you see a cursed last name? Or a woman who deserved far more understanding than she ever received? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.